Okay, so I've got a quick presentation, quickish. So if you were texting last year, you might have seen autoEdit that I was working on. First of all, I'm Pietro. For those of you who I haven't met, I'm with BBC News Labs. This is a project that I started working on when I was Vox Media as part of Open Use and Mozilla Fellowship. But the reason why I'm bringing it up again is because I've been doing some more work on top of it. And the thing that I would like to kind of like talk about is this idea of like a modular architecture. So in this case, we have an Electron application that we can then, with this modular architecture, we can then create like Linux desktop version, Windows, Mac, a Premiere panel that works within the editing software, and possibly also like a web application with the same code base with a few adjustments and things to keep in mind. Yeah, so like I like this quote. It's like the beauty of a modular architecture is that you can replace or add any one component module without affecting the rest of the system. That's kind of like the gist of it, or the effect I'm going for. So autoEdit, it's a fast text-based video editing application. It uses transcriptions, speech to text services, uses a bunch of different ones. You can choose which one to use. Does a digital paper editing workflow, which allows you to edit video interviews, and you can export the video either as an EDL, which is an edit decision list that you can open into a video editing software, or as an MP4, thanks to a module that Norian has made that comes from the Palestinian remix project that they work on Al Jazeera, and it's called FFR Remix. And yeah, you can run it on the major operating system, Linux, Windows, and Mac, and Premiere panel. The web app is kind of like something I'm exploring and it's technically feasible, but I haven't implemented yet. So the main use case where it came from is like, how do you edit video interviews, right? Like, if you have like 3 interviews, you need to combine them together and make a story, maybe a documentary, maybe a news piece. What's the process? So traditionally, people used to do like a paper edit, which is like transcribing manually, or nowadays automated, but back in the days it was manual. And then you just like chop it up, group things together, cluster, highlight, organize, and then you can see the bottom over there. It is all like glued together with the order in which you want it, and use the time codes to go and create the sequence. This is great if you're like running a workshop and teaching people how to do it and thinking about story and story crafting. Not so great if you have to do it every day, and that's why it kind of falling out of fashion a bit. So with autoEdit, the idea is like replicating the same workflow digitally, so that here you would have your transcriptions, then you select the parts that you want, and then you can get a preview on the other side, and you get the preview before exporting it so that you can readjust things. Maybe it works in text, but doesn't quite work in video, so you want to get that quick loop. Electron, for those of you who haven't come across this before, is essentially like your own version of Chrome that gets shipped with the application. So you can write application in HTML, JavaScript, EndNote, and CSS. I separate the two because depending on the context, you can have them as 2 different environments or combined, like JavaScript and Node. And it just packages like a V8 engine that would be normally inside of Node, inside with your application, and then you can build cross-platform for the operating system. You can also automate your build with Electron Builder, which means that if you're using GitHub and with a simplish Travis CI setup, you can also just, every time you commit, it would just update and create the 3 versions, so there's even less friction for you. Back to autoEdit. Once you have your app, your edit decision lists allow you to get your sequence into the video editing softwares of choice. Honorable mention for Final Cut Pro 7, even though it's no longer around, but still compatible with that, because the EDL is a very old system, but it's still widely compatible except for Final Cut Pro 10, which you need to go into DaVinci Resolve and then export an XML to go into that. So there's still that extra step that is a little clunky where you get DDL. In some software, it's all offline and you need to reconnect all the media. So that's when I started to look at the Adobe CDP panel, which stands for Common Extensibility Panel. What you can do with this is that you can run your application as a panel inside the video editing software, and then you get basically access to a whole range of functionalities of the program. This is for like the whole of the Adobe Creative Suite, so it's not just for Premiere, but I was particularly interested in Premiere because of video editing. The difference from like Electron is that it ships with Chromium, so you get your usual HTML, JavaScript, Node, CSS, but you also get this JSX, which is like a JavaScript version of a language, not to be confused with React JSX, that allows you to have some functions to control the, in this case, Premiere. So you can run some functions to do things that we'll see in a minute. So what can you do with Adobe autoEdit panel? It turns out that you can port the whole application inside Premiere, and you can use it to more quickly ingest clips, just by clicking and then importing in there. If you have your transcription, the moment you click on the clip, it can jump to that point in the source monitor, so not just within the application, but also within that. And you can also, if you have highlighted clips within the transcription, you can create a sequence based on those highlights, if you are an individual clip. And if you are on a paper edit that you made for multiple selection, you can create a sequence from that. So you don't need to like export the EL, import it, reconnect. You're right there, and you got like a shorter feedback loop and a tighter integration with the editing software. Back to the kind of reusable modular. I think I went from modular and then forgot to change the word. Architecture overview. So this is kind of where we're at. We got like our autoEdit repo, then we got Electron, the difference, the V8 engine, and the Chromium thing, and then we can kind of create all three things. So in a kind of more detailed view, we have like the web app that we could have. So in this case, we have only the front end, like the server backend is now being implemented, and that's what would do the video processing. And it's like a Backbone single page application. So Backbone is quite dated at the moment, but that's what I started with at the time, and so that's what I got. Backbone.sync is what uses to connect to the server, the RESTful API. It'd be important in a minute. So you essentially have your index page, and then it's just using Browserify to compile and package everything. So far it's just like a standard web app. I'm not saying anything new or interesting, I could say. But then what you can do in Electron is that you can override your Backbone.sync to be mocking the API request as a db.js file. And then that allows you to connect onto the system. So the lib file can then have your own modules, and then you have access to the user's file system. So this means that for use cases like autoEdit, you can do all the video intensive processing of like stripping out the audio, converting to MP4, and all these other things on the user's machine. You no longer need all the compute intensive things that you have in the cloud. And your files are stored in this NoSQL database, which is inside the standard place where you would store stuff on a traditional desktop application, which is a library folder for the user. This is important because if you update the app, then the data is not lost because it's not within the app. It's like a separate thing. And then so from the web app to the Electron app, all you need to add is this extra DB library thing and the database, as well as this main.js, which spins up the Chrome instance with the V8 engine within that. So if we add Adobe to the mix, we basically no longer need the Electron.main file, but at this point we have like another folder there that has the extra stuff that. So the extra stuff that's needed for the Adobe panel, which is like a manifest file, the JSX Premiere stuff, which gives you all the controls that you can interact with through JavaScript and give you control over the system. And then essentially, because to be able to run the application needs to be in the plugin folder for Premiere, with some NPM scripts, you can set it up so that it auto updates it into that folder, so you no longer need to like either go directly there or like constantly like have to go and change and update it. So the gotcha kind of thing in this is that some things work in one environment, but they don't work in others. So both Electron and Adobe have decided that because opening a file dialog, for example, is a blocking application, in the sense they will block the main JavaScript thread, then they implemented their own way of doing it in a non-blocking way. So that means that you cannot use the just normal input file that you would use in a web app. You need to use their own. So that poses problems. There's a few other things like this, but this is one good example. So there's a few problems around like how do you go around doing that and adjusting for these different things of the platform you're running it. It turns out that if you're looking for the process variable, it gives you a good indication whether you're in the node environment or in the browser environment. So if window.process doesn't exist, you're definitely in the browser environment. And then if the window.process environment has got either an Electron version or a CPE variable version, that gives you an indication if you're Electron or in Adobe environment. And so you can adjust your code based on these two indications. One last kind of technical thing is Adobe, for some security reason, I think, they have changed the node environment so that the default path is just the root path. It's not the path where you're actually in on the file system. This makes things very complicated, and it means their suggestion is to use like a directory name in the require, but that would mean I'd have to change all the files across the board. So instead, if I just change the directory for the process, as you see in the yellow highlight, problem solved, all the other modules continue to work So I've done quite a lot of work on this. Want to do a special thanks to Bernard from Columbia University, who helped me to figure out a lot of the Adobe CP stuff, because they had like a use case for this. And there's a lot of documentation on the autoEdit, documentation around how do you do a dev setup for using the CP panel, the JSX function that I've used and how they work, and some other stuff around how to work. Because largely, a lot of the Adobe stuff is not very well documented because it's still quite new and still worked on, so you have to read a lot of forum and stuff, so I collected some of the documentation here in case it's useful for others. That's it. I hope this is useful or interesting, and yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Any questions?
So, my question is that you said regarding JSX, you said not to confuse with React JSX. Is this where you meant that the JSX in itself is different, or is it just the framework React versus Electron?
So not to be confused in the sense that React JSX is like, I guess you can start with emulating type of thing. This JSX, it's a JavaScript language that I think is more like statically compiled. So it's just a version of JavaScript. It's nothing to do with the React. It's just confusing because that's it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I meant that at the basic level, JSX is the same, HTML like JavaScript and everything. Or is it?
No, it's not. No, that's why I said not to be confused, because it's not the one that you see in React. It's just a version of JavaScript. Sorry, it's closer to just being a programming language rather than like something you use in React. It looks like JavaScript. It's just got some extra things. And the way it runs under the hood is a little more stable, so that it can be a little more reliable when interacting with the whole system and seems React. So it's not the React.
Okay, thank you.
So over asking myself if there are any more questions before we move on. Okay, cool. Let's take a 5-minute break and then we go on to